All right, well, thank you all for coming out on a rainy, cold day for our conversation in leadership. This has been one of the defining traditions at the Colin Powell School actually since 2010. So even before the Colin Powell School was a thing, we were doing conversations in leadership. These are terrific, really authentic discussions about the life paths, the career trajectories that people have made, their choices, their values that inform those choices, the resilience that they've faced, just the many different forms of leadership. We believe that these leaders we've had speak embody the integrity and the purpose that General Powell himself served as a leader, as a model of this kind of leadership. Today we have Amy Salcido joining us. We're very excited. She's president of Kyndryl, a really eminent strategy and technology executive known not only for professional achievements, but for leading with empathy, with authenticity, prioritizing mentorship, advocating for her team. This is a really fast-moving field, so for somebody to be a leader in this takes clarity of purpose, vision, as well as empathy. This is really going to be an inspiring journey. So Amy is going to be having a discussion today with Sarah Dyer, who is our corporate partnerships manager. We're very excited for this conversation, so please join me in welcoming Sarah and Amy.
Check to make sure they're working. Sound good? Yeah. Terrific. All right. Well, good afternoon, everyone. I'm Sarah, Amy, and it's a real pleasure to be here with all of you today. As Kevin said, on this rainy day, I know that there are a lot of other places for you to be and priorities that you have, and I think it speaks to the importance of what we're going to talk about today, that you are here. So Kevin gave a very accurate and generous, I think, introduction, and I'd like to put a little more color on it. In Amy's role as the president of Kyndryl, she was responsible for leading a team of people, 15,000 individuals. If you think of the student population of City College, pretty much the same. That's obviously a role with a ton of responsibility for other people's lives and careers. Additionally, she oversaw about $4 billion in annual revenue for Kyndryl, which is, even by today's standards, a very big number. But as Kevin mentioned, one of the things that Amy is best known for is her leadership style. And when we think about leadership as being a little different from management, management is what did you do, when did you do it, at what cost, or what result did you achieve? Leadership is more about how did you do it? What values led you in certain directions? How did you persuade and influence people to do certain things, right, at times when it was hard? And we're going to get into all of that. Before I do, I'd like to acknowledge and thank Amy for something else, which was under her leadership at Kyndryl. Kyndryl became the primary sponsor of the Social Mobility Lab here at the Colin Powell School. And the impact of that work has been great and continues on. And Kyndryl is becoming kind of a recognized name here at the Colin Powell School. Just a couple weeks ago, a bunch of folks from Kyndryl visited campus to meet with students to talk about preparing for careers in technology industry today. It was very well attended, and Amy herself came, which I think was wonderful. And there was a very sincere, warm regard for Amy, her work at Kyndryl, not only for her skills and achievement as an executive, but for the person that she is and how she does her job. So Amy is willing and eager to talk to all of us about her leadership practice, which did not start recently. It has been a lifelong journey, and we will start at the beginning. Amy lives in New York now, but it wasn't always so. She hails from Texas, and I would love for you to kick off by telling us a little bit about your environment in Texas, your neighborhood, your community, family, friends, school. What was Amy like as a late adolescent young adult?
Okay. Well, look, I grew up in a small town. So first of all, before I answer Sarah's question, thank you for having me here today, and thank you all for being here and taking your time to join this conversation. And I do hope, as we get to the end, it is a conversation, so think about questions that you might have. It's a safe space. I may or may not answer. No, I'm joking. I will answer everything that I possibly can. But to Sarah's question, I sort of jokingly say you don't get to choose where you're born, which is true. But I was born in a small town. It's not small anymore, but it was at the time. I think around the time I was born, it maybe had 6,000 people in the town. I graduated from the same high school as my father. So you can imagine it was an even smaller town at that point for him. And it was, it was sort of a typical kind of town with, there was a high school, there was, a number of, I think there were 3 or 4 elementary schools. I mean, it wasn't a huge town, but there was some life there. But, nothing necessarily that stood out. Now, if I tell you physically where it is, the thing that stood out is, and the thing that has made it grow exponentially since, is that it is essentially the town where DFW Airport, the Dallas airport, now exists. That did not exist when my grandparents first moved there. And so, it's a completely different place today because it's at the center of commerce. That's what transportation and airports will do for you. But, in my, look, I was I have the scars to prove my tomboydom. I, fell out of more than one tree and had some broken bones and an elbow. Don't do that. That one's hard. But it was kind of basic in terms of just if you were reading it in a book, what you would think about. Now, I would say for me personally, being very open, that was sort of the external world. The internal world was a little bit more turbulent at home, very openly. My parents divorced when I was 4. And so I lived with my mom, who had a severe mental illness. And, behind closed doors, it wasn't always quite as idyllic as maybe the town was outside, right? So I'm not here looking for sympathy. I'm just saying that was the reality for me, was that there was sort of an inside version of my world and an outside version of my world. Luckily, in addition to climbing and falling out of trees, I loved school. I loved to read. I loved to sort of throw myself into, that part of my world, maybe as an escape. I don't think you know that when you're 10. But certainly those were, for me, sort of formidable activities that I really focused on.
Yeah. So school was important,
Yes.
and you did well.
Yes.
Yes. Okay.
I was
so-
that annoying kid that they'd be like, the teacher has to leave for a few minutes. Amy's going to be in charge, and everybody hates you. So, that's a double-edged sword. Were you that person too?
Sometimes.
Okay. So, yeah, I was that kid.
Okay,
But-
so kids like that, though, tend to perform well, right?
Yes.
And I know from your bio that you found your way to university. And can you talk about that transition into kind of that new frontier for you, what you chose to study, why, and how that kind of shaped your ambitions for what might happen after university?
Yeah, so look, in the lead up to going to university, I had some ideas about what I wanted to do in terms of what I wanted to study. I had no idea what I wanted to do necessarily as a career or a goal. You know, I sort of vaguely remember being, 10, 11, 12 and thinking, I'm going to be like the first woman senator from the state of... that didn't work out. But by the time I got to high school and was graduating and thinking about school, it was sort of a turbulent time personally, and there was sort of a disagreement of, I was going to have to pay, but my mother didn't want me to go far away, even though I was the one paying the bill. And so it wasn't like this joyful, like, oh, let's go decorate my dorm room. There was none of that, right? And so it was really, I like to study. I will find something, right? And I'll find my path. And, it's just about where can I go? What can I afford? Where can I go to school? Because that was the most important thing, was to go. And look, I was really lucky, kind of in those earlier years. I had a wonderful opportunity when I was probably in the 4th and 5th grade to be part of sort of a special program that was a bit, I don't want to say ahead of its time, but it was a very kind of free-form kind of class. So one day a week, I got a chance to be bused to a different school with other kids, and I had this amazing teacher that I to this day believe she taught me how to think in a way, right? It wasn't that she was teaching a subject, right? She was teaching you sort of ways to use your mind and how to think, and that, she used all kinds of creative things. What I now know was meditation. Had no clue. She didn't call it that, right? Exercises like putting 20 or 30 things in a box and giving you 30 seconds to look at it and go back to your desk and write down how many you can remember. We ran a business, right? I was the treasurer of the business. We made buttons. I know. But we made buttons and we sold them for 10 cents a piece. And we all had stock in the company. And so it was just a completely sort of out of the norm opportunity that I'm forever grateful for, because that was part of what helped me understand that if I went to university, like, no matter what the subject was, I was going to learn something, and I was going to sort of find my way, even if it wasn't sort of the traditional study it in a book, take a test, go do that for the rest of your life kind of approach.
So what I hear you saying is you have a big appetite for learning and experiencing, and also there's a mentoring thread in there as well, that you responded really well to someone maybe a little older, wiser, taking an active interest in you and nudging you to grow.
100%. Mrs. Kirkpatrick.
Thank you for naming her. Yeah, I hope she's listening, if she's still with us. So, and more of that at university prior to launching your career?
Yeah, so university, I ended up deciding I wanted to study political science, partially because I was interested in the subject, but again, I liked the aspect of it that made you think, right? Doing the analysis and the way you sort of looked at things. And yes, I was very lucky. My freshman year, I had two professors really take an interest in helping me and giving me a bit of a confidence boost that I wasn't, completely in over my head. And, I remember that vividly, and it stays with me. Like I can envision conversations with them still that are very vivid in my mind, even though that was unfortunately not last week. It's been a while, but that was, again, very formative for me because someone took an interest, they believed in me, they told me I was on the right path, and that stuck with me, right? And I know them, I can see them lecturing in the classroom, I can see those conversations sort of imprinted in my mind, and that was important as I progressed.
Absolutely. I'm sure it makes the professors in the room feel good to hear you say that, always making an impact. How'd you get to IBM?
Yeah, so this funny thing happens and you graduate. And, my senior year at university, I didn't, I was a political science major. I did an internship for a congressman. It was kind of what you do in the local office. I didn't go to DC. And that was interesting. I mean, that was, a kind of wild experience. Just for the record, the things that people call their congressman about is really beyond anything that I could have imagined as a, I guess 19-year-old at that point, 20-year-old. And so, I mean, it was educational in multiple ways. But I had no idea what I was going to do after graduation. That was not clear to me. And I didn't know how to start, right? I didn't have anyone at home that had a blueprint for me. And look, I'm very lucky. Both my parents had actually gone to school, but they went into what I would call professions. My father was a pilot. My mother was a medical technologist, so she had gotten a specific degree for that. There was a clear path for both of them. But again, candidly, like neither of them were like sitting down with me and helping me and, saying, let's think about this, or do you like this? It was just sort of go find a job, which is a lot of pressure when you have no idea how to do that, right? Like, I was like, okay. And look, I had been working since I was 13, right? I started babysitting for money. Then I worked in a string of retail shops. Like, I paid my way through school, right? So I had to do that. I had to have a paying job on top of the internship, on top of doing stupid things like taking 18 hours a semester so I could graduate early because I couldn't afford to stay, right? So I piled up and I did all these things, but nowhere in any of that was there any kind of guidebook or guide person telling me like how to figure out what's next. Like, what do you do after you walk across the stage and get your diploma, right? And so I walked across the stage and got my diploma, and I still had no idea what I was going to do. That was just the reality for me. And so, I thought, well, all right, I'll keep doing all these other jobs I have because I have to keep making money. And then, and we'll talk more about this, but as I've learned with many things in the professional life, it's about connections. I had a friend that was graduating from university a semester after me, and she found a job through her father who had a connection, and she started her job, and she sort of said, "It's not horrible. Do you want to come work here?" And I was like,
endorsement.
ringing endorsement, but yes. Because I think if I had to listen to my mother say one more time, how many people did you call today? I was just going to cry. So I was like, whatever it is, yes. I don't know. I don't understand it, but sure. And that was IBM. And so it was my first professional job right out of university. I did not study tech, as you all just heard me say. I had a very different sort of background. I was fortunate. I mean, I knew some things about tech. It had been part of, my schooling, but it wasn't a dream. I didn't have a passion for it. I didn't, go through 4 years of school saying this is going to be amazing. I'm going to create AI, right? And so, in my first job, I was grateful for it, but it stretched my comfort zone a lot because it was taking calls from angry people because something was broken, right? And professional people, right? This wasn't any of us just individually calling. It was a company calling to say something wasn't working, something wasn't, right. They needed help. And I had to say, you have to pay for that. Well, that's an uncomfortable conversation if you've never had it before. So, it was, there was nothing about it that felt like a dream. Maybe a nightmare, but not a dream. And so it was really a means to an end for me. I had a job, right? And I felt good about the fact that I had a job. And I felt good that I was getting like a real paycheck, and it was different than, waiting tables and trying to get tips and all the things I had done through school to try to make my way. And so, I sort of took pride in that, right? I took pride in the fact I had a job, I had a paycheck that they were taking Social Security out of and all the other things, right? But I embraced that, even though the job was terrifying me because I was talking to all these angry people. But your next question, Sarah, is probably like, why did you stay?
Something like that. Something like that. It's actually, was there ever a time when you doubted that decision, that either that you belonged there or that you'd have a future there? Was there any unease about those early years in your career? And if so, how did you push through?
Yes, all the time. And look, part of it was just, I think I went into it, and I don't know if it was arrogance or naivete, but there was this part of me that's like, this is temporary, right? Like, I'm just going to do this for a while, make some money, but then the real thing will show itself to me. My real purpose, and I don't even think I was smart enough to think of it using a word like purpose back then. That's a me now word. But I just was like, okay, I'll do this for a while, right? It's paying the bills, it's making me some money, and I'll get out of here soon, right? But I still didn't have the skills to look for something, even if I had wanted to, right? It's not as if magically I had solved that part of the equation. But, a funny thing happened, which is I turned out to be good at the job, which was as shocking to me as to anyone. And somehow I calmed down these crazy mad people. And there is a feeling that you get from that kind of achievement or success, right? That kept me saying, okay, I could do this a little while longer.
So like competence builds confidence,
It
builds
does.
excitement, and yeah.
It does.
Makes sense.
And I realized that, okay, I didn't expect to be good at this, but I am, and it's working, and it seems okay. But I still would always say, for now, at the end of that sentence. And that lasted for a long time.
Okay, it did. I know how this story progresses, but maybe you could kind of move us through towards kind of that first big international opportunity. How did that come about, and what did that do for you in terms of informing the leader you became ultimately?
Yeah, so after those early years, I found myself sort of progressively getting to step up a little bit at a time, right? So I went from being on the team to being a team leader, which is a sort of fictitious title in the corporate world, that it means we're not ready to make you a manager of people yet, but we would like you to do all the work of the manager. I learned that the hard way. So somehow I found myself as a team leader for 3 different, side note, men that were managing the teams. And I thought, is it just me or am I doing all the work? So I applied to be a manager myself. And I had a very unpleasant sort of experience. It was my first really unpleasant corporate experience, which was the person who was hiring for the manager, who these other people who I was already supporting already worked for, said, no, you know too much. You're too into the details. And I was like, how's that a thing? Like, you can be too good? Like, you can know too much? Like, and so that was the first moment where I said, okay, I actually like what I'm doing, so I want to stay, but I want to do more. And it's clearly not here in this particular group, right? And so that set me on a journey, and I'll try to just hit the highlights. But one very important part of that was my sort of catapult out of that particular organization was into working for a woman who became my mentor. She is, to this day, about 20 years older than me, and she is still one of my dearest friends. And she is one of those go-to people in my life that knows me and is very much has played a mentor role for me over the years. And anytime I start to make a decision or a change, it's not that I run it by her for validation, but she knows me. We talk it out, right? And those people are important in your life and in your career, and we'll talk more about that. But I did just want to call that out because she sort of lifted me out, and that's really part of the conversation we want to have here today, is who are those people that you can help lift up, and who are the people who will help lift you up, right? And I was fortunate to have that person that sort of lifted me out of this, what felt like stagnating part of my career. And once I got with her, I started to get more visibility. She wasn't trying to hide me or take credit for my work. She was putting me out front. She was making sure that people knew it was me doing the work. And that enabled me to then have other people notice my work, notice me, notice what I was doing. And somewhere in that journey, she started having me travel across the world, right? Which for me, I had traveled a little bit, but not a lot. And that cracked me open like nothing that I can describe, because it allowed me to start going all across the world, having new experiences, meeting new people, new cultures. And there's a terrifying part of it, but I never felt so confident as conquering all these places I was traveling by myself, right? I was traveling by myself. I was going into, rooms full of people that may or may not want to listen to me and what I have to say, and different cultures, right? I mean, I was really all over the world. I was spending a lot of time in Asia. I was spending a lot of time in Europe, and so it was just all new for me, and I was just like soaking it in. That learning part of me was just like, I'm here to learn, right? I'm here to learn every single thing I can about why they're listening or not listening to me, how they interact with each other between countries. And then suddenly, through that process, I was offered an opportunity to go move and live outside the US, and I had my choice, and it was a very difficult decision. I had my choice between Tokyo and Paris, and ultimately I chose Paris. And To this day, that is one of the most important decisions, not just of my career, but of my life. Having the courage to say, I'm going to pick up this girl from Texas, I'm going to pick up my life, and I'm going to move to a country that I have no idea how it operates. My French is dismal, but they've asked me to come, so they see something in me that says I can do this, so I have the confidence to do that. And it was a real launching point for me into the next phase of my career and starting to sort of move up into more senior roles. And just for the record, it was hard, right? It took me 3 tries to get a telephone in my apartment. I didn't even want a telephone in my apartment. You know, like, I mean, there was the life part of it that I had sort of not thought about. I was just like, I'm going to go to work and I'm going to be great. And then it was like, do you know how to get the electricity turned back on if it turns off? Like, I mean, it was learning so much new, but I think that, while scary, and by the way, if you have a water leak, you call the fire department. I didn't know that, but I had experience that required it. So, you know, it was dropping through the ceiling and the chandelier of the apartment. And so, you know, you learn things and you become more confident personally and in the office, and it all kind of feeds on itself.
Yeah. So what I'm hearing is there was a lot of personal, professional growth through the discomfort that you welcomed into your life.
Yes.
By moving abroad and figuring it out.
Yes, absolutely.
That mentoring relationship was also really critical in you becoming the leader that you were. And you know, one of the things that we like to talk about with students is that a really good mentoring relationship is always reciprocal, right? And I am sure there is something that you were delivering to your mentor as well. The opportunity to be a mentor is really a beautiful thing in anybody's life at any stage. So even if you're still a student, keep in mind, there are students who are younger than you are, maybe high school students. If you're a senior, there's a freshman. And the opportunity to mentor is a great place to practice leadership skills, right? And
It is.
Maybe we can get into those leadership traits, attributes that you used in your executive leadership at IBM and then leading the Kyndryl US operation. You were described as an authentic leader and an inclusive leader. Would you share with us what you think those words mean in corporate life?
Yeah, I mean, there's no one definition. So look, I think when I was still living in Europe, because after Paris, I had the opportunity to go to Madrid, but one of the things that I learned there is that I knew so little, just to be honest, right, about how cultures work together, who kind of has a history with each other, country-wise, culturally, right, beyond person to person. And sometimes for the good and sometimes not, right? I'll never forget being in a meeting in France and 2 people like screaming at each other, like hatred is what it sounded like to me. And then I saw them downstairs having a smoke. Yeah. And I was like, what? Like, they're like, oh, that was work. And I was like, you can separate that? Like, that was like a first to me. That was new. I had no idea. Like, you can have a disagreement with someone professionally and still be their friend. And I was like, okay, I don't know if we do it that way where I'm from, but that's helpful, right? And so that started part of my journey of inclusivity. It was understanding people come from different places, they come from different backgrounds, they have different points of view, and they're all valid, they're all important to listen to. Now, I will say their stereotype of me, I think you're all too young, but they sort of envisioned me coming from the TV show Dallas. They thought I lived on a ranch. They thought I had a gun. They would tell people this at the office, and I was like, no, don't do that. Like, you know, I don't have a horse. I'm sorry. Like, so I thought, okay, then maybe I'm making assumptions about them too, right? And so for me, that started my journey of thinking, okay, people are individuals, people have different backgrounds. How do you get everybody's point of view to the table? And when I finally came back to the US, I moved from Madrid, Spain to Charlotte, North Carolina. It was a little bit of culture shock in the beginning because dinner went from being at 9 p.m. in Spain to 5 p.m. in Charlotte. So I had little things like that to get past, but that was, then I was leading a team, right? So I come back, I'm in this job where I'm leading a big team, and I'm thinking of all these things I've learned in these years that I've been gone and I've been dealing with these different cultures, and it was all really applicable, right? And so, you know, and I had to think about how do you get people to work as a team? How do you get everybody to bring the best of themselves to any given problem? And, you know, it's not easy, and it wasn't like I had like a roadmap for that, but I do think those years of sort of learning how to work in other cultures really helped me to recognize everyone's role and everyone's value and have everyone bring their full selves to work and to the problem. And so, you know, for me, I just found I had to kind of find those little ways to get through to people. Like, when I first got there, like, one person on the team, she really hated my guts and didn't want anything to do with me. And I was like, how do I break through? Like, and how do I feel like I can get her to sort of speak up more and know that I do value her point of view? And, you know, and then she became a lifelong friend, right, eventually. So, but we had to figure out the little dance a little bit. And I think as a leader, that's part of your responsibility is how do you get the best out of everyone? How do you lift them up so that they feel seen and that they feel they can bring really their whole self to work every day and just be authentically themselves, because that's when people are most powerful.
Yeah, agree. Feel safe to do that. There are not a lot of women in senior executive roles in tech, right? And oftentimes when we think about underrepresentation in certain fields, we think about bias and barriers and maybe even a certain loneliness that comes with that status. In what ways might have being different been an advantage or offered you a superpower in your role?
Yeah, it's a good question, and I think it's funny when you say that. The first thing that sprang to mind is that first job when I came back. I always sort of jokingly said that they looked at me like a zoo animal because here I was. It was I was supporting a client that was very male-dominated, and here I was coming back from all these years in Europe, and their initial reaction was to misjudge me, and so I didn't want to do the same, but it made me aware that I was a little bit of a zoo animal. I was different. I was unique, maybe is the appropriate way to say that, because everyone that had supported them before had been a man, right? All of the technical leadership that they had on their side were men. And so, I didn't feel like I had to prove myself per se, but I felt like I had to learn how to navigate it, because there was an inherent bias, whether they intended for it to exist or not. It did, right? And so, that was kind of, it was difficult in the beginning to navigate, and it's certainly something as I moved on in my career, moved up in my career, became more true. That the sort of the higher you go, the fewer women in tech there are. And it is, I think there's a point where you sort of have the confidence in yourself that it propels you through any of those kinds of awkward typing kinds of situations. But certainly there's uncomfortable moments along the way, right? Whether it's someone saying something inappropriate or just underestimating you, or, but I think for me, once I got to a point where I felt like it was my responsibility, I couldn't put it on other people. So it was on me to build the next generation of female leaders, to make sure there were more of them, and to normalize it, to say it's, they're amazing, but they don't have to be unicorns, right? Like they can be in all of these jobs and in all of these roles, and you start to sort of show that by lifting people up and putting them in those jobs, finding people that might be hiding, languishing somewhere in an organization because no one saw them, no one gave them the opportunity, and sort of pulling them out and saying, I know you can do this. I started to feel a responsibility for doing that.
Yeah, sort of like we were talking earlier about there's probably some discomfort for them in that positive stress that actually is generative, right, and gets people going. So that's wonderful. Would you want to spend a moment just, obviously you're not a performance robot at all times, you have responsibilities in a broader life, and many of our students juggle things like having, full-time academic work, they've got jobs, they've got family responsibilities. How were you able to attend to other aspects of life and maintain that high performance that is required in the types of jobs that you've had?
Yeah, I would love to say I always was able to do that, but the reality is there's times that something gives, right? As I said earlier, there were periods of time where I was, doing unpaid jobs and paid jobs and all those things to get my way through university. As I progressed in my career, there was a point, one of the reasons I finally came back from Europe to the US is complete coincidence, but both of my parents ended up sick at the same time. And, regardless of what your relationship has been like, I think there's a pressure sometimes that you feel like it's your responsibility to come back, to take care of them, and flying from halfway across the world forever to do that wasn't, to go to doctor's appointments wasn't tenable as a long-term strategy. So, I was sitting there again with these two people who don't even speak to each other and live in different places, who both need care, and I'm trying to progress my career and have some semblance of a life. And, it can be a lot sometimes, right? Like sometimes something gives, and sometimes, full disclosure, you don't handle it the way that you wish you had, right? It's sometimes it's really hard in the moment to know what the right decision is, of how to juggle your time and what to prioritize, and the thing that most often gives is how you care about yourself. I think that's generally true. Specifically for me, it definitely was true. I was really giving everything to all of these people in my life who needed it, and to work, and to the people who worked for me. And, it just, sometimes it did feel overwhelming, and full disclosure, if you don't have a good therapist, get one, because
Always good advice.
You need someone, whether it's a friend or a professional. It really helps to have someone that doesn't have any skin in the game to give you a perspective, right? It could be a friend, it could be a mentor, it can be any number of people, but it helped me start to see that, me like running full out, burning the candle at both ends for my job and flying all over the place, taking people to doctor's appointments and really not taking care of myself was a strategy for burnout and bad things to happen, right? So I would love to say that I have a formula for how you balance all those things, but it's just hard. Like, I mean, that's just the reality of it.
I believe it. Let's talk about leadership through periods of change. Now, as everyone here knows, Kyndryl was formed as kind of a break-off company from IBM. It's an technology infrastructure and consulting business. You were in the executive leadership role in the US. I would imagine this was an opportunity to build an organizational culture from the ground up. Were there certain values that you wanted your teams to embody that were non-negotiable?
Well, look, so just to give everybody a little bit of context for how this works. So IBM was a very large company, right? At the time, there were probably 400,000 employees globally. And this is about 5 years ago now, that they decided to take 25% of the company, and the legal term is spin off 25% of the company and make it a separate company that would become independent, so no longer tied to IBM in any way. And so, you know, I vividly remember October 8th, 2020, 7 a.m. in the morning, to the senior leadership team, they made the announcement, and I was on that call, and it basically was, we're separating this part of the company, so anyone working in that part of the company is going to that company, and it's not negotiable, and everyone else is staying. And I had been in a role for just 4 months that said I was in a seat that was going. And so there's an initial sort of like, I've been at this company my whole career, right out of university, and now they're telling me I'm leaving, right? And so there's like that moment of like, did I just get kicked in the stomach? But then very quickly I realized, okay, this is a moment of change and transformation, not just for the business, but for me, right? And I kind of got my head around, okay, all I know right now is that 1 year from now, when this split happens, I'm not going to be working for IBM. I'm not going to be working for the company I've worked for since I came out of school. But it doesn't mean I have to go with the new company. I have autonomy. I can make a decision, right? I can decide I'm going to interview and look at other things and see what's going on in the market, which I did. But then I ultimately decided the spinoff was a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. And so I decided, yeah, I'm in. I'm going to do this. And yes, as a senior leadership team, very quickly, we really looked at how do you get people excited about this so that they're not sad that they're being asked to leave and go to a different company, essentially? And how do you get them to feel like this is a chance to do something unique? And what does that look like? And how do you do that without saying the thing that you've spent your life doing is bad? So it's a real balancing act of saying, okay, the company we've all worked for is amazing, but how do we build something new and different? And so honestly, I think one of the best things we did was ask the 80,000 people who were coming, right? We said, what do you want the culture to be? And we really took that input, and that became part of us trying to say, okay, without, again, saying this is bad, how do we create something that's new that people can get excited about and feel sort of attached to? And I think, you know, building a new culture, you could see it gave people, it like breathed new life into people because they felt like they were getting to be part
They were
building something. Yeah,
co-architects of what was
exactly.
to become. Yeah.
Exactly.
Amazing. I do not think anybody wants to waste the chance of sitting with a technology executive to ask a little bit about this new wave of digital transformation, right? Digital revolution. I'd like to spend just a second on AI and ask you, what are the leadership considerations, like capital L leadership considerations for AI company executives and also for businesses that want to use AI to dramatically transform themselves?
Yeah, I was going to say AI is not really about tech companies only, right? I think, so I'll start with the part that's probably most in the news and maybe on people's minds is this notion that, is AI coming for all of our jobs, right? And look, there will be work that is automated, right? But that's been happening, right? There have been waves of automation for years, right? That's not just happening now. So that's just smart business, and not just good business, but it's good for people too, right? Learning new skills, doing things differently, modernizing, automating things that used to be done completely manually. Robotics, cars used to be built by hand. Now robotics builds a lot of the cars and on the manufacturing plant floor, right? So these have been progressions for a long time. And some of it is really good because, it gives people an opportunity then to move up into the next more complex, sophisticated types of skills and work that needs to be done. And it leaves some of that work that can be done through technology to be done that way, right? It's more cost effective. It's also, increasing the skills of the person who's moving up to the next set of skills. And so there's been a pattern of that. It is accelerating, right? And I will say, I think there's a couple of factors. So even beyond just AI as the phenomenon that it sort of is right now, COVID really did an immense amount of sort of thinking for companies, right? So COVID happens, and using an example I think we can all relate to, retailers, anyone who was selling products, consumer products companies started selling direct to you as a consumer. Retailers realized, if I don't figure out how to get product to you faster, you're going to get everything through Amazon. Or how do I have it so you can pick it up at the store without coming into the store? So I saw the retail and consumer products companies in particular do, what I would say was probably 10 years worth of digital transformation in a very short amount of time, because there was no choice. It was that or go out of business, right? It was survival. So I think that started a lot of, really aggressive push. And then, of course, every, chief security officer in the world was like, wait, what did you just do? That has, let's catch up. And there was a little catch-up period, but then the speed started again. And so these things are going to happen. There'll be another wave after this one. But I think the important thing for all of you as you're thinking about what's next after school is, there will be jobs. Will they be the same jobs? Maybe not. Or even if it is the same job, you will do the job differently than the person who had a similar job 10 years ago or even 2 years ago is doing the job, because you'll have more tools, you'll have more, opportunity to do things in an automated way. You won't have to do it as manually, right? So a lot of it will be good for people, but yes, there probably are some jobs that may be eliminated completely. There'll be some jobs, and I think the majority of what you'll see is jobs that will be AI assisted. And so it's about, what are you doing to hone your skills and to grow new skills, and in order to be ready for that. right? Because I think that's an important aspect of this is how can you think about, yourself and how you're getting yourself ready for taking on these kinds of new ways of working.
Yeah, amazing. Amy, how are you thinking about the next chapter of your career?
Yeah, so look, I mean, it's a interesting question because you've just heard this whole journey that I've been on, and obviously the beginning of my journey was very, I think I'll generously call it accidental. It wasn't a grand plan, right? And then, I have this moment where I take this great leap and I go live in another country, and it sort of starts to open me up, and then I start to get a little bit more prescriptive about, okay, I belong here, I see what I can do, and then I have an opportunity to, be part of starting a new company, which is super exciting, and being a founder of a new company is once in a lifetime. And so I found that as I went, and part of it is just because the funnel kind of narrows as you move up, but that I became more intentional. What do I want to do? What I used that word earlier, purpose, and I said I used it too early because this is the part where it actually applies. As I said, it's me now that thinks about purpose. So, for example, the partnership with the Colin Powell School, it was something that from the very first moment that I heard about it, a year and a half, almost 2 years ago, I just said, okay, like this is something that makes sense for business to get involved in, but at a very personal level, I felt it, right? I felt that connection to how do we create the next generation of innovation leaders, thought leaders, technology leaders, business leaders, right? So how can I play a role in lifting people up and learning from my experience and talking about things like mentorship, right? Which, maybe we'll touch on just a little before we end. But, and so I have found that the business side of it is still exciting to me, but I am finding that the human side of it, the people side of it, is much more where my passion is at this point. And so, this sort of started to create another one of those friction moments that you've talked about, Sarah, where for me, which was, where do I want to be really spending my time? And as much as I love this business that I helped build, and being a part of that and leading a big team, I feel like this next step in my journey is really more about how do I open that aperture and have a broader impact. Even though having 15,000 people that work for me is a broad impact, I feel like there's more to be done, right? And I think I can do that in new and different ways, whether it's working with universities like this one. I have also the opportunity to become a board member, which gives you the ability to also influence a corporation from a different point of view, from a governance point of view. And so, these are the things that, I'm really thinking about for me personally as a next phase. But I do want to bring it back to the mentoring thing by saying...
Take it away. And then we'll invite questions from the students here.
But a key part of me coming to this conclusion that it was sort of time for the next step in my journey for me was a mentor, right? So not only the ones that I've mentioned up until now, but very specifically, I have a former CEO who was CEO of a $100 billion company for 10 years and has a lot of experience running a business, leading large groups of people who really, this is something when you're looking for a mentor, it clicks or it doesn't, right? And we can talk a little bit more about that. But this is someone who from the beginning, we really had a very similar sensibility, and someone who I trusted their business sense and their human sense, right? And so we had very, thought-provoking conversations about what is the right timing of taking this next step. Is it now? Is it later? What feels like it's most true to you? Don't stay for money, even though that's a really hard thing. But, I think that it was just another example in my life of how having a person who's been there and lived through it and could have a very open dialogue with me about the pros and the cons, and being open about their own personal experience and maybe even their own personal regrets about things they missed out on by not taking this step sooner, or by missing things in their family because they were running a $100 billion business. So it's just another reminder of how important it is to find those people in your orbit that can help you not make decisions for you, but can help you navigate and help you think through it because they've been through it. And a mentor doesn't always have to be someone older and wiser that's been there. It can be a peer as well, but it's someone that, for me, it has been an invaluable tool to have these people in my life and have them, help me be able to think through these decisions and think about what's next or how do I want to approach something.
I'm convinced. Fantastic. Okay. Friends, students, it's your chance now. Would you like to come forward? Daniel has a...
My name is Angelina Sharon Gomez. My one request to the United States of America government, give me justice. I have evidence against harassing crime. My one request to the United States of America government, give me justice. Thank you.
Do we have another question?
Thank you so much for your comments. And if loved what you said in terms of giving us a big picture on what technologies are coming forth and how you get through it. Could you just give us, on a granular level, walk us through either actions or words that you as a leader can use when you already have your team and your employees and you see some new technology that's coming your way and you can feel the fear, am I going to have my job? What kind of things do you say, or what kind of things can leaders say to their teams?
Yeah, so I think a big part of it is helping people embrace it, right? And understand how to use it versus be afraid of it, right? So helping people with the idea of, upskilling, right? Increasing their own skills in a particular area. And look, sometimes, honestly, that's something you just have to go do on your own. Whether your employer is sort of sitting everybody down and holding a class, there's a lot of resources available that we as individuals can use, right, or can go get. And, and I think, a lot of people probably in this room are using technology every day. I think all of us have a phone in our hands. A lot of people are obviously using ChatGPT. So part of it is even just becoming comfortable with it on a personal level so that it doesn't hold so much fear. But there are also a lot of opportunities for classes and learning, whether it's through LinkedIn, whether it's through school, whether it's through other external programs. But I would just say it's on each of us as an individual. So while I would love to say every employer is going to go give people all this education about AI and what's coming and how you're going to use it in your job, not everybody knows yet, right? It's not all clear. It's not all mapped out. And so we do each as individuals have a responsibility to kind of go dip our toe in at the very least, even if we don't become experts, and listen to a class, listen to a podcast, listen to something that kind of gives you a perspective on at least the what is it, and then you can start to think about how it might apply in your world. And it's different by industry, right? I mean, and I see that. I see, businesses are able to, automate certain processes and things that have been done manually. We talked about robotics in the manufacturing world. In the healthcare world, there is a lot of automation in this space because whether we like it or not, that is often more reliable than human knowledge alone, right? So it's how do you, as a doctor or a nurse, sort of embrace that I can get more data, I can have a better, more thorough kind of viewpoint of my patient if I kind of embrace these technologies, right? So sort of depending on what industry someone's in, it might be different, but there's enough sort of basic education out in the world at this point that it hopefully can at least take away some of the fear factor, right? And look, I do think that, it's, again, not only industry dependent, let's be honest, some of it's generationally dependent. Certain generations are much more comfortable using tech than others, and we see that play out in the workforce as well, right? Some are eager to sort of embrace and jump to the next thing, and others are sort of a little bit more resistant and want to hang on to the way we've always done it, right? And so I think as a leader, you have to think about ways to pull everybody in and get them to understand that you don't want to threaten, like, this isn't a choice, but you do have to say, like, it's coming, right? It's coming. So either we can work together to get you ready for how it's going to change things, or you're potentially going to be surprised by, the way that it starts to impact your job. So.
Thank you. My name is Yuheli. So I would like to know, like, based on your experience and your background as a child, did you ever face like any insecurity or self-sabotage, like as an adult and as a leader?
All the time.
And how do you overcome it?
Okay, all right. So look, I would love to tell you that you get to a certain level and you never feel that way, but it's just not true. We're human, right? So there's always going to be those moments of, am I making the right decision? Is there something else I should be doing instead? Did I, if it's in terms of like leading people, did I say the right things? Did I do it in a way that comes across very empathetic and authentic, right? Because as a leader, people will smell it if you're not authentic, right? So yes, those moments are there all the time, but I think it's sort of what Sarah said. If you embrace it as that friction that actually makes you better, it can propel you, right? So I have often talked to teams about being like creating a change confident culture, so being confident in the idea of change as a sort of constant state. And I have to embrace that for myself as well, right? As leaders have to embrace that. Like, okay, things are changing, things need to change, I need to make a different decision, like, what is the right path forward? And of course, as a human, you always think, am I getting this right? Or am I really gonna screw this up? And you have to have enough confidence in the foundation of all the skills you've built, all the experience you've built, and to know that, you can still screw it up, but it's probably not going to be fatal, right? So I think part of it is just embracing that even as a leader, you're not perfect. You're not always going to get it 100% right. So you pivot, and you say, okay, I'm going to tweak this, and I'm going to move this back this way, and I'm going to get us back on track, right? And but yes, if any leader ever said, I have the right answer all the time, and I feel totally confident, I really don't think I'd want to work for that person, because I would be terrified that they aren't keeping their eyes open, right? They're not kind of looking around that next corner to see what's coming, or anticipating the thing that they don't know yet, because there's always a thing you don't know, right? So yes, very humbly, I will just say, yes, I feel it, and you kind of just have to push through it, and you have to have that faith that even if it doesn't go exactly as planned, that you can learn from that, your team can learn from that, and that it will make you better in the long term. Daniel, back to your left.
Hello, my name is Odilenia, and my question is, what's the best way for a young professional to find a mentor who truly fits their value and growth path, and rather than just like choosing someone based on title or position?
It's a great question, and one that I love, because you heard my example, like people at all different levels have been great mentors to me. And look, I think, and I appreciate the way you framed it, which was, how do I find a mentor? And I think that's important, because finding a mentor is your responsibility, not the mentor's responsibility to seek you out and find you. And that was a hard lesson for me. Back to those early days of my career, I was like, my performance is so good. Why is someone not like plucking me out and mentoring me? And then I finally was assigned a mentor, and it was one of my least successful mentoring relationships, because I didn't know the person, they didn't know me, and I didn't know at that point how to actually cultivate a good mentoring relationship. And, the big learning for me is you're in control, which I used to take as kind of a negative. Again, like, they're supposed to come find me. I'm so great. Like, they should want to mentor me. But then you don't know what you're going to get, right? So you finding someone that you think has an amazing sort of point of view, or that just you had a good sort of chemistry with, that you liked what they had to say, or, it could be, again, it could be a peer. It can always be a peer-to-peer relationship, as well as kind of a vertical up and down relationship. And so I think the most important thing is finding someone who, you've heard them, you believe in what they stand for, what they have to say, and you just, feel a bit of a connection there. If there's no connection, it's really hard to build a relationship. So like in the example of that I just mentioned, my guy that's been a CEO for a long time, he would tell you the same thing. We met the first time by video, and he's like, I want to meet you in person before I decide that I'm going to say yes to mentoring you, because I need to know that there's a connection there, that we really are going to sort of hit it off. And I was like, okay, all right, sure. We're having an interview for me to be your mentee. But then I thought about it, and I was like, that's actually fair, right? That's because you want that closeness to create the honesty that you need to have, and the trust that you need to have. But then it was very much up to me, once he'd sort of said, yeah, we're good, it works. It was up to me to drive it. Like, how often are we going to meet? What do I want to get out of that? What do I want to talk to him about? Do I have a specific problem this week that I want to run by him? Am I on the bigger question of my life and my career, and what point am I at in my journey? But it was really on me to decide how to use him, when to use him, and to drive the agenda with him. But I think, look, the first thing is don't overthink it, because it doesn't have to be so formal, right? It can be a very casual, relaxed, like I said, even peer-to-peer conversation about mentoring, right? So I think I made the mistake of thinking like, ooh, a mentor, like it's this almost untouchable kind of thing, you know, and I probably worked myself up too much about it. And I thought all the work was supposed to be on them. They were just supposed to be helping me. And it's really the other way around. You're supposed to figure out what help you want and ask for that help and ask for those points of view.
Take responsibility for your own growth and development,
Yeah.
and the mentor is a great tool in that. I think that needs to be our last word. It's a great place
Okay.
to end. Thank you, Amy.
Thank you,
Super
Sarah.
generous with your ideas.
Thank you.
And anyone, I'm hoping you can linger for a minute. If
Of
anyone would
course.
like to come up and meet you personally, thank you
100%.
again. And thanks
Thank
to
you.
everybody who came today.
Yes,
Take care.
thank you.